Hey, I'm Abby.
And I'm Shannon.
And we're sisters.
My big sister Abby has a Master's of Divinity from Earlham School of Religion and has been telling me Bible stories for probably 15 years.
And my little sister Shannon has seen 13 versions of Jesus Christ Superstar and has read parts of the Sermon on the Mount. Together, we're bringing you fun facts, historical context, and Bible stories.
Well, Bible stories according to you.
No, according to you.
According to you!
This is the Bible.
According to my sister.
Hey, Shannon.
Hi, Abby. Did you see the Olympics? The opening ceremony was last night. Did you watch it?
No, we didn't watch it. We don't have a TV. We probably could live streamed it somewhere, but it didn't occur to us, and we ended up watching Star Trek instead on a different streaming program, which was good, so.
That's a really good alternative.
Yeah. Did you guys watch it?
I know. I'm house sitting at a place where they don't have internet, so I ended up watching it. This is probably the first time I've watched the whole opening ceremony straight through since I was little.
I know I watched. Maybe it was the Winter Olympics 2 years ago.
4 years ago.
No, it would have been Summer Olympics 2 years ago. I think I watched most of it. I don't know, but not this year. Was it good?
I mean, it was fine. It was really cute. It was very colorful, and I liked that.
I like colorful.
I don't have any, profound insights into how good it was. I have nothing to compare it to, and I can't be it was such a good representation of blah, 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 blah. It was pretty. It was pretty, and it was lots of fun, and I love seeing, the happy athletes. And I know you don't get this, but one of my favorite things about Olympic seasons is I feel like every news anchor has this, 5 minutes where they get to just tell the most dramatic story ever. And it's, they get to use the words that are, the pinnacle of human drama and achievement.
Yeah, see, those are the parts I'm oh my god, just get over this, show me this event.
I know, you hate it, and it's my favorite part is when the newscaster is this is the moment. And they just keep going, and it just keeps more intense and tense and intense until it's this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. I love it. I love it. It's like a happy soap opera.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoy it. I'll just mute them.
Okay, fine.
And watch the sports. But Winter Olympic sports are pretty cool. I really like them, so.
Yeah. I don't actually have a clue what you're doing this week, so I think I want to go over to the Bible story corner.
Let's do that.
Let's do that. Yeah, so what is it this week?
Okay, so this week is actually a story that was requested by someone who's been listening, Michael, and he reminded me that when this is actually going to air on February 4th.
It's going to be Valentine's Day.
It's going to be Valentine's Day and Ash Wednesday.
Oh, and so, a religious holiday.
A religious holiday. So he wanted to hear a story about Jesus, and he specifically requested the Transfiguration of Jesus, because it's an interesting story, a weird story, and kind of wanted to see what we would do with it.
The Transfiguration of Jesus into a cat?
No.
No.
It's called that. Jesus himself does some changing in it.
Okay. Maybe we should start from the beginning.
That may help or not help at all, actually, in the case of this story.
Okay.
So this is the story of Jesus, and there are 3 different versions of it in the Gospels, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The Synoptic Gospels, if you remember that.
I was going to say that. I was those are all either synoptic or not synoptic, and I couldn't remember which. Okay.
The Synoptic Gospels. The stories are pretty similar, actually, with, a slight difference here and there, but there's not really a dramatic difference.
Okay.
So the story goes like this. Jesus takes 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, up to the top of a mountain. And when he is up there, he transfigures. He turns his clothes start shining white, and his hair gets all white and shining. And I think some of the translations said whiter than any white humans could make, and I think some said pure. So it's he's almost glowing. And then Moses and Elijah appear, who are figures from the Old Testament, but very important figures in the Jewish tradition. And Jesus talks to them for a few minutes, and then I believe it's Peter goes, after some shock, kind of goes, "This is a wonderful event. Can we build tents and houses for the three of you?" At which point a cloud comes over the area, and you hear the voice of God say, "This is my son, listen to him." And then Moses and Elijah disappear, and the cloud goes away, and Jesus supposedly is no longer glowing, and they walk back down the mountain, and Jesus is like, "Don't tell anyone that happened, at least not yet."
Oh, I have so many questions.
I know. I figured you would. And then in the book of Matthew, they say, "So how can you be this person if Elijah hasn't come yet?" And Jesus said, "Elijah came in John the Baptist, and now I'm here." And then they go off and cure some other people, and the next story kind of starts. The curing people isn't part of the story. It's just usually what happens next in the text.
Okay.
So,
in the life of Jesus, where does this take place? Out of curiosity.
I knew you were going to ask that. In different Gospels, like, it comes in different places. So, and Mark is kind of in the middle of the story. The book of Mark, is a little bit more around what's called the messianic secret of who is Jesus, and Jesus' identity is kind of a secret, but there's like these little clues throughout, and this kind of clue comes kind of in the middle. I think it might happen shortly after like a prediction of Jesus' death, but I don't think it's anything particularly big. Kind of the same thing with Matthew and Luke. It takes place a little bit closer to the end of the narrative, kind of like the beginning of the end of the story. Kind of like Jesus is this person, and then death is the next chapter.
Okay.
In broad outlines.
Yeah.
So in Mark, it comes in the middle because, like I said, it's more like these little clues and glimpses of who Jesus is. In this story, the purpose of it in Mark seems to be giving one more clue or one more hint of who Jesus is. And the answer to that, Jesus' identity is that Jesus is the unique Son of God. Because in Jewish tradition, or just tradition in that region, a son of a god could be a political person, the ruler of a country, maybe like a warrior, a religious leader. Son of God was thought of differently than we think of it now. And so this kind of story is saying Jesus is a unique son of God, and people should listen to him.
That was even true in monotheistic cultures? Like, even in the Jewish communities, there were people who were sons of gods if they were kings or something? Or was that just like a cultural thing, like with the Romans?
If memory serves, I think King David was called, like, the son of God. Perhaps a few other kings. I can't think of other ones off the top of my head. I have to go back and really look at that. But, yeah, there are a few places in the Old Testament where that kind of reference is made.
Okay. I was just
angels
curious.
also are called sons of gods in places in the Old Testament, so...
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just kind of like in that region of the world, probably in other regions, but I have less cultural context to that.
Yeah.
So Mark is saying Jesus is this unique Son of God right here, right now, listen. In Matthew was written to more of a Jewish audience, so Matthew in this story is framing this story as, look, Jesus is the fulfillment of the law that happened in the Old Testament, and then he does some interesting literary things with this story and the resurrection, and then Luke's all about Jerusalem being really important, so he kind of sees this as like the moment that Jesus starts moving towards Jerusalem and to Jesus' death.
Okay.
So his identity then leads him to Jerusalem and claiming the suffering of the cross and the resurrection.
Well, so you started this episode by talking about Ash Wednesday. Does this story have anything to do with Ash Wednesday? Like the beginning of the Easter Lent story thing? Yeah,
so as a Quaker, we don't do much with Ash Wednesday, so someone can correct me if I have this understanding wrong, but Ash Wednesday doesn't have actually much to do with the Transfiguration of Jesus. It has more to do with kind of fasting in the desert of Jesus. There is a Feast of the Transfiguration at a different date. I don't believe it corresponds to Ash Wednesday. It's just an interesting story near the beginning of the death story of Jesus, so in some ways it leads into that story. But if someone listening has a better idea, or I'll actually can do a little bit more research after this and maybe do an update at our next podcast.
Either way, we get a cool Jesus story
Yeah.
on a date where it's the beginning of how other people celebrating that.
Yeah.
lead into the Easter season.
Yes.
You said something about John the Baptist and Elijah. John the Baptist being my good locust-eating friend. Like, I love John the Baptist. I think he's awesome. What did you mean? I don't know anything about that.
Yes.
Or is that a rabbit hole?
That's a rabbit hole I know less about.
Okay.
So Elijah is very important in Jewish tradition. During one of their feasts, they always leave a chair open for Elijah. He was the one who kind of like, he's carried off to heaven and doesn't actually have like a death scene.
Jedi style!
It's more like UFO style.
Okay.
I think that's another thing I can look into and maybe talk more about, but not being Jewish, I don't have a lot of that context. But I think it's saying Elijah is supposed to prepare people for something, and John the Baptist was supposed to be like the role of Elijah in preparing the world for Jesus.
Ah, okay, I gotcha. So not so much the person, which wouldn't make sense, but the idea of paving the way for Jesus to show up. Okay. So Jesus goes up a hill with his friends. I'm trying to like go through it again to see what all my questions were.
Starts glowing.
And okay, so how do they know it's Abraham and Elijah? Like, do they have
Moses.
pictures? They break out their cell phones and are like, oh yeah, that's the dude.
It's Moses and Elijah to start with.
Sorry. Moses and Elijah. It just is because it's a story.
So it just is because it's a story. So I don't know if this fits in right at this specific place, but I'm going to just throw it in here anyways, and maybe it answers your question, maybe it doesn't. So in another podcast, we were talking briefly about apocalyptic literature, and you referenced it to being like dystopian literature, which in some ways it can be, but there's another interpretation of apocalyptic literature that I didn't mention, and that apocalyptic literature is a revelation. It's revelations, like of pulling back the curtain between earth and heaven and seeing a glimpse.
Revelation.
So
Revelation
like,
in the term of reveal.
Terms of reveal, yeah.
Okay.
And so some of the story can really just going to be seen as being like a weird vision, and you're trying to interpret a vision into human language, and like how in a dream you just know things. I don't know if you've ever had a mystical experience, but in a mystical experience you can also just know things.
Yeah.
And so this apocalyptic literature, this little apocalyptic literature in the Gospels, is revealing this truth that is able to be seen in heaven, but is less seen on earth. And so that revelation is Jesus glowing, a revelation of whose Jesus' identity is. And you can see that alongside, Moses and Elijah, these great prophets and apostles, and in Jewish tradition. So it's just a symbol or metaphor maybe of a truth that's going to be explored later on in the story and in the death and resurrection of Jesus.
Okay.
Which is one reason why this is all hard to understand and wrap your head around, because it seems so like, even though the Gospels are filled with a lot of miracles, this is like even more like a what happened there?
Yeah, it's so quick and odd.
It's quick and odd, but it's trying to maybe foreshadow things that are coming.
Okay. Is this another one of those like boxes you have to tick off? Like, I'm thinking when John the Baptist was dunking Jesus and God goes, "This is my son for who I am proud," or something like that. Yeah. Like, that's one check mark. Like, oh yeah, that's okay. That makes sense. We have to prove he's Jesus. He's like the Messiah this way. Okay. And then this is like another check mark. Like, and now he's hanging out with Moses and Elijah. There's another check mark.
Yeah, you can definitely see it in that way. I mean, especially in Matthew, but in Luke and Mark too, to a certain extent, Jesus being with Moses and Elijah ties Jesus into the larger Jewish tradition. Kind of saying Jesus isn't coming in and just throwing everything out. Jesus is coming in, fulfilling laws and prophecies that have been made throughout the Jewish tradition, and he's part of this tradition.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that, the ticking off the boxes with, like, Jesus' baptism. God said pretty much the same thing at Jesus' baptism as God says in this story of, "This is my son, with who I am well pleased. Listen to him." I mean, it's almost verbatim in all three of the texts. God says this at the baptism, and God says this at the in the clouds in the Revelation.
Well, that's why I was wondering if when, like, the people writing the Gospels are trying to prove their thesis, they're like, see, it happened here, and it happened again here? Like, if this is just them trying to state their case.
Yeah, I mean, it's like more like, this is Jesus' identity, this is God reaffirming after Jesus has done a lot of his ministry stuff up to this point. This is God saying, yep, this is still Jesus, this is still my son, with whom I'm well pleased. It also ties back to the Moses story, in that in the Moses story there's a part where Moses goes up to the top of a mountain, glows, hears the voice of God out of a cloud, and then comes back down. Which is kind
cool.
Yeah.
Literary
happens.
motifs or something.
Yeah, it's very much a literary motif there. And Matthew, in some ways, reverses that motif.
Yeah.
Like he keeps that motif with the story, and then in the resurrection story, he has similar things. So he's kind of picked on for being the Son of God when he's hung out on the cross. There are 3 people who are witnessing him being hung on the cross. Only at the crucifixion, it happens to be 3 women. He's framed in that story by having 2 criminals on either side of him, in the place of like Moses and Elijah. So he
What a great story.
He ties it back to the past and then a new future thing.
Oh, very cool. I kind of like this now that I have all the we've pulled together all the strings and the pieces.
Very, very interesting story, and one I haven't actually dug too much into, which is why there's a lot of like, I think this and I think that.
Yeah. There's a lot going on.
It's a lot going on, and a lot of it's tied to Jewish tradition, which I don't think about much, really. It's just like, oh, well, that's the thing. Like, with Elijah, like, oh, yeah, well, John the Baptist was Elijah and bringing Jesus forward. Like, oh, right, why? So that was a really good question, but...
Well, then what makes it important to Christians? I mean, so much of it... Well, yeah. I mean, it might be obvious, but a lot of these things sound like they're tying back to the Old Testament to try to prove something. So, do Christians look at it differently? Do they simplify it or anything like that?
To most Christians, the divinity of Jesus is very important.
Yeah.
A lot of Christians base their Christianity around that, and that's a whole other discussion about what the Bible says about that. But this is like one of the places where you can make the argument that God is saying, Jesus is my son. Mm-hmm. Jesus is divine. There is something special about Jesus, and that is why you should listen and pay attention to Jesus. So this story is one of the linchpins of who is this Jesus person and why are they important? Because there were a lot of prophets at this time, a lot of people claiming to be the Messiah. So why is Jesus the one who you should pay attention to and you should listen to, and now has like a 2,000-year tradition? And this is one of the stories that tries to answer that question of why is Jesus important.
Okay, so what else do you have? Do you have any other things you wanted to bring up in relation to this thing?
As of right now, no, I don't think I have anything like real particular to dive down deeper into this. I mean, it's a really kind of odd story, kind of a really intriguing story. And when I was trying to do some research on it, people just didn't really know what to do with it beyond what I just explained to you.
Yeah.
And a lot of like, apocalyptic literature showing who Jesus' identity was. That's why it's weird. And that's all we've got. And I was trying to look for like some different perspectives, women's perspectives, like specifically feminist perspectives or womanist perspectives or post-colonial, or just like anything. And everyone was pretty much, they'll touch a lot of stuff in there, but not this particular story. I don't know if it's just because they don't have anything to add or if it's just so odd and different. It's just kind of like that's the check mark of what it is. Of, yep, this kind of thing happens, and think of it as in visionary terms. It's just...
So people are just like, yeah, it was this weird moment. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was kind of like that. Like, I can give you some historical perspectives on how it fits into the literary narrative of this larger story. And I mean, I guess we could spend like an hour trying to go through like, well, this is the difference in Mark, and this is the difference in Luke, and this is the difference in Matthew, and this is why the differences are there. But I'm not sure that would be entirely intriguing to most people who are listening.
Yeah.
And I get the general gist of those. So, I mean, it's really interesting. I would love to have like Bible studies with people about this and see what they think about it, especially since so many of my friends are theist and non-theist.
I'm just kind of miffed that... no, maybe not.
Yeah.
Is it wrong to be miffed that Jesus is hanging out with 2 other guys? Like, when when God sends these people down and, like, these are the good, like, these are the most important people. There's a bunch of guys.
Well, I guess it could be miffed.
And is that because of the culture and, like, the people who ended up writing the Bible? Like, everything is so focused on men that they don't notice? Or...
Okay. Whew.
Let's make our own feminist theology, Abby.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that culture, it is very men-focused. Mm-hmm. I mean, like we've talked about in other places. You can actually say Jesus' story is pretty weird because there are so many women in it.
Yeah.
There's a group of women who follow Jesus around from place to place. Possibly they support him financially. Women are the ones who show up at the cross and show up at his tomb. Jesus gives a high level and place and value to women. It doesn't really show up in this particular story. But if you're trying to tie Jesus to past traditions, there aren't many important women in the older traditions to really tie him to in lots of, like, laws and traditions. So I think it is hard to bring that into this particular story. So it is a very men's story. To your question of did people just not notice that there were women in there, there's some speculation that there were actually some more women names in the New Testament in some early translations that later translators decided needed to be changed to men's names because there was no way that a woman could be important in the early church.
That's amazing. We'll talk about this more later, Abby. I need facts and information.
Yeah. So one you could definitely say there was some gender erasing in some translations. I can look for some facts and we can do a podcast on that at a later date.
So is there a good way to wrap this up?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, so what do I do with this story?
Yeah.
And the answer is I don't know. My theology around Jesus is very complex and not complex at the same time. So when I kind of think about it and what to do with it, I think it's a really important story of, like, understanding how people understood Jesus. And I think this is a different rabbit hole, but I think there's some truth to this story in that truth isn't always fact. Sometimes truth can be, like, truth in terms of, like, metaphors and things like that, and gleaning things. And so I don't think anyone can doubt that Jesus was an important person. And Jesus had some really amazing things to say, whether you think of Jesus as being fully human or fully divine or somewhere in the middle. And this story kind of can illuminate that Jesus was really important in what he had to offer to the world, and people saw that, and they're trying to tell that in a way that shows the importance of Jesus beyond maybe just in his certain time and a certain place and, like, a grander, larger narrative, and that there's a reason we should maybe pay attention to what Jesus had to say and what Jesus had to offer us.
Yeah.
And I can find, I mean, that's really beautiful. And we can talk about, like, what those messages were at a later date, but, like, this little narrative is saying Jesus was important. Listen to him.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the purpose, I think, of the vision in many ways, of Jesus is important. Listen to him. No matter what else. That's what to get out of it. And because what he had to say was countercultural and counter empire or counter Judaism or counter whatever. It wasn't the normal story, and that can kind of be what leads to Jesus's death in some ways. The importance, the amazingness of what he had to offer.
Yeah.
Then walks us down to this path of destruction and suffering later.
Yeah. Well, that got me thinking, like, now that I know what story you're talking about, because, like, I didn't know anything about this story coming in, and then you told it, and then you said, what do you take from it? And then I was like, oh, wait, should I take something from this, too? Because I really like Jesus. I think he's a cool dude who said a lot of cool things, and most of the time I generally think of him as, like, a really good teacher who was one of us, a human, you know, who just had some really good ideas. When you think about it in the sense that there were these, like, magical things happening around him, and this being one of them, I think of it in the sense of you know how internet people can decide something is real and something happened? There's this... so I was thinking about it this way. After Carrie Fisher died, Carrie Fisher played Leia in Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And after she died, Mark Hamill, who played Luke, was on some kind of talk show or something, and he was saying, I imagine Carrie Fisher in the sky smiling down upon me, and then slowly, sweetly extending a middle finger or something like that. That was the gist of it. And there were a couple others. She said when she died, she wanted the newspapers to say that she was strangled by her own bra. And there's all these, like, things that we tell about her that aren't true, but everyone on the internet has just agreed that they're true. Like, she's totally up in the sky, flicking us all off. Like, we've decided these narratives are true, and we need that spark of magic to make it real and to make this person matter. And so whether or not Jesus was standing next to Moses and Elijah doesn't matter, because we all agreed that that's what happened, and that's what's true, and it makes him matter. So,
or in the lineal tradition, Jesus is standing next to these great prophets.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't literally, but it's at least figuratively. Like, he's in the same ballpark as Moses and Elijah, these huge people in Jewish tradition.
Yeah. Yeah. So, whether it's true or not, we've decided it's true. And so, that's what matters. That's what actually matters. So I don't know if I believe it on, like, a very realistic way that this happened totally, but because we all agreed that it happened, it doesn't need to be real or not. Yeah. It can matter. And it can make Jesus' words matter, and that's even more important.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I think it was John Dominic Crossan says something to the extent of the people who wrote these stories wrote them symbolically, not to be taken literally. And today we take them literally instead of symbolically.
And it's hard to switch your mind back into that, because it's something that's completely foreign. So you can't, like, fault people for not quite doing it the right way, but it's a brain challenge to figure that out.
Exactly.
Cool.
The story holds that tension between figurative and literally, and what do you take with that? So
yeah.
That was the Transfiguration of Jesus.
And all of our commentary surrounding it.
Yeah. So that brings us to Silly Stuff with Shannon.
Yeah.
What have you got for me?
Okay. So, there's a story to this one. So, I have the Babylonian bee. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
No. Okay. I have evangelical friends on my Facebook, and they'll occasionally post these articles that are completely fake satirical articles. Everyone knows it. They're from the Babylonian bee, which is kind of the Onion for Christians.
Okay.
And for those who don't know, the Onion is a website that just makes completely random nonsense articles. Like I can't even think of an example of one, but basically they're just fake, but it's like something that happens every day in your life. Like, woman stands in front of cabinet contemplating Doritos. And that's their news article. It's just bizarre. And so my friends would post these articles, and most of them were really funny. Like, they would be things about, like, worship singing and godly jam bands and stuff like that, and I thought it was really funny, so I decided to bring that for Silly Stuff for Shannon today.
Okay.
Yeah. And it started out really good. And usually you're the person who's like, and then it went dark. But I'm going to do a little bit of that, but it'll be fine.
Okay.
So the person who started pulling this together really wanted to find a lighthearted way to celebrate Christianity, you know? And just make some jokes. So somebody else who isn't the person who made it was talking about it and said Christians could use a good laugh, and God invented laughter. Laughter wasn't an accident, and we all need to laugh more. And I love that philosophy. I am all about that. And the person who actually writes it is really interested in how satire can be a mirror to the truth.
Right. Yeah.
And so you write these articles, and that gives everyone a moment to, like, laugh about it and then go, oh, that's true. And really be able to think about it and like, wrestle with it, you know?
Right, yeah.
And that's like true with everything. So it was really good. And I read all these articles about it, and that was really fun. So I pulled up their website, and I went to their church page, and they had these funny articles. And it's definitely geared more towards, we're Quaker. These, like, mainstream Protestants, evangelicals. I think they say it's for evangelicals, but everyone can enjoy some of it. But there's an article that's couple has baby just to be admitted into church social circles. thousands miraculously fed at church potluck with just 5 dinner rolls and 2 tuna casseroles. They're just goofy.
Yeah.
I really like them. Oh, then there's like a 10-year-old meme gets second chance at life at church social media post. Because
they're behind the times.
You know, like after 10 years we realize that memes exist and then we repost them as church things. Anyway.
Yeah.
They're really entertaining. Unfortunately, there are other tabs on this website besides just the church tab. They have Christian living, celebs, politics, lifestyle, sports, and entertainment. So they have news articles under all of these categories.
Yeah.
And this, yeah, I know. And this is where they go a little bit, I think they go a little bit afoul of that mission of laughter and really turning the mirror on Christianity itself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So the articles are written and offered up by unpaid freelancers who are just making them up and writing short little stories and passing them along. So they have this mission to hold up a mirror to Christians, but then on pretty much every page besides the church page, what they're really doing is just taking pot shots at liberals and liberal religious people. And that bums me out.
Yeah, as religious liberal people.
Yeah.
Me specifically, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, well, me too. And I think in doing that, they're disenfranchising a group of people. And as Christians, we should try to be as inclusive as possible to everybody. And I think they would say the same thing, but at the same time, they have this headline that says, bigoted progressive Christian refuses to call God by his preferred pronouns.
Oh, yeah.
I know. And that's just like, okay. So God has a pronoun now, and it's he. So in that moment, like, what they're actually saying is Christians who believe that not calling God he are wrong, and that we should hold a mirror up to ourselves and see how wrong we are. Check out my satirical article about how bad you are.
Yeah.
Okay, but honestly, like, besides that, if you can just, like, if you're good at ignoring things, I think it's a really funny website. Yeah.
You stay away from those articles and stay more with the, like...
With the ones that are actually just about, like, silly church things.
Yeah.
They're really fun. I think it's amusing.
I might have to send you some, like, mistyped programs. They're, like, sites that have, like, mistypes in programs or on church signs or...
Yeah.
Various things like that. It sounds, like, similar, but really funny.
Yeah, the lighthearted things. Yeah, anyway, I really like it because when my friends post stuff, it tends to be the more lighthearted, goofy things, and I don't get upset about those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And will you post some of those on our Facebook page?
Yeah, I'll link to some of the articles on our Facebook page, and you can enjoy some of the silliness too. Because I mean, as they did say, like, we do need to laugh more.
We do need,
and this is a good way to do that.
Cool. Well, thank you for introducing me to the Babylon Bee. I hadn't heard of that, which is weird considering Mice Girls.
Yeah, you have many more Christian, like, people on your Facebook page. I'm surprised none of them have posted.
Yeah. Not to my knowledge, anyways. Maybe I can introduce them to it.
Yeah. Well, I guess thank you to everyone for tuning in, and as always, we have our last question. So, Abby?
Yeah?
I have a question for you.
Go for it.
Okay. So, what is the Bible?
Oh, that's a tough one. After today, I'd have to say the Bible is weird. Weird like a camouflage sheep standing on the side of a mountain.
Nice! Hey, this is Little Sister Shannon, popping in with a few notes at the end of the episode. This week we'd like to thank Stephen Kartenberg again for our intro and outro music. It's Gutalele's Happy Place, and the URL, so you can go and see more of his music, is on our Facebook page, as well as the info box for this episode. You can find us on Facebook or on Twitter. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/Bible Sisters, and we're on Twitter. Our handle is @BibleSisters. Thank you so much for tuning in. We always have fun making this, and we hope that you enjoy listening to it. We will be back on February 28th with a brand new episode. Hope to see you then.